This is probably going to be a mistake. I have fizzy water. Not a good idea to drink fizzy water when you're doing a broadcast. Because I'll be burping. Hello, welcome to a live. Good afternoon, 4 o'clock here in the UK. We are doing the Bald Explorer live. It's the reading of In Search of England by HV Morton. Cheers, everybody. But that is very refreshing. Feeling that little bit of gas explode in your mouth. Waiting for the burps to follow. Anyway, here we are. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good noonie afters, says Ed Loud. Nice to see Jeff, who says, you're saving me from CNN. I thought someone was going to have to talk me off the ledge. Don't worry, we'll talk you back on the ledge. After listening to me for half an hour or so, you'll be going back on the ledge. Just started steaming veggies, so I will be farting later, says Turbo Stream. Which direction is the wind? Have we got a wind that's coming from the north? Is that, if I always get this wrong, people continually tell me. I think it's the direction the wind is going, not where it's coming from. So it's a north wind. If it's a north wind, we've all had it. Anyway, lovely to see you all. Thank you very much for coming along. I will do my best not to burp too much with this fizzy water. Ed Loud says, I hope the water contains free-range bubbles. Well, to be fair, when they're released in the cup, or the glass, or the tumbler, or the cylindrical vessel that has a bottom attached to it that contains a certain quantity of water, they do have a certain amount of free range in there. I mean, nothing is free range, really, is it? I mean, you can have chickens, but you can't really call them free range because they're unable to buy tickets and go on trains or catch an aeroplane to different places in the world. You know, they're still stuck within the farm, even if that farm is 7,000 acres. They're still got limitations. So I think free range is a sort of a misnomer, really, isn't it? We're all trapped. Gravity traps us, mostly. Gravity. That traps all of us. Apart from birds, of course, they seem to be able to defy it by flapping their wings. Anyway, welcome along. Lovely to see you. A southerly wind will blow it north. That's what we want. Absolutely. So, I can't remember where we were. Oh, in Bath. We were in Bath, and there were bubbles in Bath, I'm sure. Nice foamy bubbles. Anyway, let's crack on, shall we? I have been reading with avidity. How do you spell? How do you pronounce avidity? Avidity. There's too many. Avidity. Avid. Is it avid? No. Avidly. Avidity. Avidity. If you say a word too many times, it starts to not make any sense whatsoever. I've been reading with avidity the medical pamphlets provided free in Bath, as you do, and I feel that my arteries become harder and harder every minute. I wonder whether the ache in my left eye is paraplegia. Well, the one in my left eye will have a job to be anything. It's more acrylic. I had no idea what this is, but when I whisper the word, something anonymous seems in mid-air with bare claws. It is hardly possible that I shall escape from oculara. Obesity does not worry me. I don't know what oculara is. Sounds like something rather nasty. I hope he's not going to list too many of these conditions because I just will not be able to read them. Intestinal stasis. Well, perhaps. Chronic It's a burp. Vestal catarrh. I wonder. As I glance down the long list of diseases cured at Bath, feeling a sharp twinge of fibrosis, a swift jab of lithaceus, and an alarming touch of rhininitis, it is perfectly clear to me that the average human being's chance of seeing Bath more than once is 100 to 1. So, early in the morning, wrapped in a dressing gown, I gained the lift and was carried down to the baths to begin a day's treatment, just to see what is in store for most of us. I decided against the mud pack because I didn't like the picture in the handbook, which shows a nurse building up a big black mud pie on the patient's foot. I considered the whirling bath of hydroelectric bath, the heat bath, the hot air bath, the vapour bath, the aeration bath, and came to the conclusion that probably the best bath for a man with no real honest symptoms is the deep bath. The characteristic bath of Bath, the bath with the historic and literary associations, because it is simply the scientific version of the treatment as practiced by the Romans and by those of our 18th century forefathers who drew the first gout dividends before investing them for us at 30%. A man in a white coat took me to a tiled room. HV Morton, that doesn't surprise me. What does surprise me is they took so long. Sunk in the floor was a huge bath with 6 steps leading down to swirling green water. The water gushed in from the spring, steaming hot at a temperature of 120 degrees as it comes up from the nether regions. I assume that's centigrade. Cold water was added till the temperature was 100 degrees. Well, maybe it's Fahrenheit then. I walked down the stairs, was buffeted by the hot steam of radium, and the man in the white coat told me to sit down, which I did trustfully, for I could see no seat in the green water, but I met it just as my chin touched the flood. So I sat there, feeling hot and apprehensive. He told me to exercise myself gently. I say, steady on, this is a family show. And I could tell that he considered me a genuine patient, which made me feel quite ill. Which is the affected part? He asked. Everywhere, I said. A general massage? He cried, briskly, taking up a big hose pipe, placing the nozzle under water and shooting a strong stream of water, several degrees hotter than the bath, up and down my spine. This was a delicious experience. My spine purred. In 10 minutes, the treatment was over. The attendant stood at the top of the steps and received me into a hot towel. He received me. How delightfully put. He received me into a hot towel. It was then that I felt my first real symptom, sharp pain in the knee. I went up and had a melancholy breakfast. Now, with us invalids in the next event is the pump room. At about 11 o'clock, we drag our weary limbs to the stately Georgian building, which since 1796 has been the ever-open door to goutery, to rumour trickery, and the sciaticary. The classic apartment is built above 3 hot springs, the only natural hot springs in Britain, which shoot up 500,000 gallons of water a day into Bath. A girl in a cap and apron stands at a fountain which bubbles with warm water. We limp on our sticks, and she hands us a tumbleful of water. We limp to a Chippendale chair and begin to sip it. Now, Sam Weller said that it has a very strong flavour of warm flat irons. Somebody must have dropped a dumbbell on the sauce when Dickens tasted the water, for it doesn't taste strongly of warm flat irons today. To be quite truthful, Bath water tastes well, just like any other warm water. If you are imaginative, you can suspect a subtle aftertaste. Is it warm flat irons? It is not, however, very strong. The water affects us differently. Some of us write letters, some seem to go to sleep, others wander around as if looking for the sedan chairs at the statue of the fat Beau Nash, at the calm bath of gently steaming pea soup known as King's Bath, now disused, but during the 18th century a place where Christopher Anstey noted, "'Twas a glorious sight to behold, the fair sex all wading with gentlemen up to their necks." Round the King's Bath are rings, presented by grateful bathers in token of their recovery. One bears the name of lovely Barbara, Duchess of Cleveland. One, given by Thomas Delves, records that he was, "by God's mercy and pumping here, formally aided." By God's mercy and pumping here formally aided. Everybody drinks bath water. We invalids do it seriously. The casual tripper does it flippantly. We limp up and put one finger halfway up the glass and whisper, "Only 8 ounces this morning." The tripper strides up and heartily says, "A pint of the best, please, miss." And the maiden of the healing spring gazes over the top of his head. The maiden gazes over the top of his head towards the sky, where no doubt she sees great... Well, wait a minute, can't be, must be over... Oh, gazes over the top of the invalid's head. Got it. And gazes to the sky, where no doubt she sees the great god Neuterus, whatever, saving up his thunderbolts. If our joints are equal to it, we can walk gently downstairs to see the source, the very heart of Bath. An attendant in the nether regions unlocks a bronze door, and we walk into a wall of white steam. Our eyes become accustomed to the gloom, and it's very hot. The steam condenses on our hands and our face in a clammy sweat. We see a Roman arch and Roman steps leading down to the springs. Hot water trickles, steaming, down these steps. They are stained rust red with minerals. Beneath the arch, just out of sight, bubble the hot springs, which, as long as there is any record of having been pumping up... What are you saying? Beneath the arch, just out of sight, bubble the hot springs, which, as long as there is any record, have been pumping up their daily 500,000 gallons of water. Why does this hot water bubble up to Bath? The latest theory is that there is a deep crack in the crust of the earth through which volcanic gases escape. They turn into hot water when they reach Bath. The old theory that Bath springs are composed of seawater volcanically boiled and delivered in Bath is, I understand, being gently but firmly abandoned. However that might be, the sight of the source is most convincing. We feel, as we stand in the dark Turkish bath looking at the steaming gloom, that there is something unaccountable, something unique, something rather terrifying. It looks as though it ought to do us a lot of good, and of course it does. There are nearly 2,000 years of testimony behind Bath. Then we limp back to luncheon, choosing those dishes marked with an asterisk on the menu. Recommended by the Bath Medical Council for visitors taking the cure. Hors d'oeuvres are safe. Cole's Colbert are safe. Veal is safe. Roast duck is not. Mutton cutlets are not. Roast beef is not. Bath chaps are all right. Lobster is not. Stewed fruits and Devonshire junket are heartily asterisked. so we can help ourselves out there. If our doctor told us to sleep in the afternoon, we go upstairs to sleep, which is never difficult in Bath. If he recommended exercise, we limp down to the Sydney Gardens to listen while a military band plays Gilbert and Sullivan. It is so soothing in the sun under the tree. A pretty nursemaid in a canvas chair pushes the perambulator an inch forward and an inch backward as she sits watching the circle of scarlet coats rise above a circle of geraniums exactly in the same colour. The flowers that bloom in the spring, tra-la, have nothing to do with the case. How delicious! How our brittle old bones desire to get up and dance. We tap our toe on the grass. It replies promptly by stabbing us with a scarlet stiletto. "Don't be a fool," it says. We look at the time. 4 o'clock. Time to drink the waters again. So we rise heavily and limp off in the direction of the pump room. Then, as dusk falls... Oh, but I cannot write any more. The pain in my knee is much worse. I was rather foolish to take that bath. I wonder if the cure has given me rheumatism. And we'll pause there for a moment, ladies and gentlemen, and see how you're all doing. Southerly wind will blow us north. Elegant place, says Morton Lewis. The pump house is lovely, with wonderful tea, says Cynthia. Oops, pump room, even. I prefer Buxton in Derbyshire, though, says Morton Lewis. Malvern, too. Malvern, Richard, Malvern. One can actually buy Malvern spring water here. Well, I have some... Buxton spring water, funnily enough. Shush, don't tell anybody. It's not a bit of advertising. We'll put those on my list to see as soon as this virtual stuff settles and I can travel again. Still got some left from last week's trip, says Morton. Anyway, I need a wee after all this water talk. I'm not at all surprised. One of the greatest discoveries made by Charles Dickens was the name Pickwick. It is well known that he annexed this name in Bath. There is a village just over the Somerset-Wiltshire border called Pickwick. I went there to see it. It is a one-street hamlet on the Bath Road, and all the houses in this hamlet are built of stone, washed, built of stone-washed... What? All the houses in this hamlet are built of stone, washed in an attractive khaki colour at the expense, so I believe, of the lord of the manor. At the entrance to the village street stands a big sign with the name written on it in tall green letters, so that every char-a-bang load that passes points and suddenly says, "Oh, look, just fancy, Pickwick!" That, so it seems, is as far as one gets with Pickwick. Does a family named Pickwick live there? I asked a native. "No," he said. "Does the place take its name from a family that used to live here?" I asked. "I don't know." "Did Charles Dickens take the name of Mr. Pickwick from the village, or from a man called Pickwick?" "I don't know," replied my negative friend. "But he wrote his history in the Hare and Hounds down the road there." "What history?" I asked, mercilessly. How do you ask something mercilessly if you've got his throat in your hand? "What history?" "Why, the history of Pickwick, of course," replied the Pickwickian. So that was it. I should state that the rooms round Bath in which Dickens wrote are as numerous as the beds in other parts of England in which Queen Elizabeth slept. There is probably no name so well or so loved in English fiction as Pickwick. He and Falstaff may never die. So I set my shoulders to investigate the origin of this name, and I discovered at length How Pickwick Entered English Literature. When Dickens visited Bath, the White Hart Hotel, which stood on the site of the present Grand Pump Room Hotel, was owned by a man called Moses Pickwick. This name, as Sam Weller noted with some suspicion, was written up over the doors of the coaches. Moses, in addition to his hotel, owned a profitable livery stable and ran a daily service from Bath. The name of Pickwick fell on Dickens like a ray of sunlight. What a name, he thought, feeling for his notebook. That was the beginning of the immortalisation of Pickwick. So well known is the name now that French students of English literature will talk freely to you about Monsieur Pickwick. But who was Moses Pickwick, and how did the name originate? There is a curious story about him. He was, it is said, the great-grandson of a foundling. A woman driving through the village of Wick, near Bath, saw a bundle lying on the side of the road, which on investigation proved to contain the first Pickwick. She took him home, cared for him, and christened him Eliza Pickwick. Otherwise, Eliza Pickwick. Eliza picked up at Wick. Right, Eliza picked up at Wick. In the course of time, the foundling founded a family in Bath, which grew rapidly prosperous. When Dickens arrived on the scene, the great-grandson of Eliza was a man of wealth and position. Dickens provided the fame. From this, it was a step to the Bath Directory. Here I found that there are 5 Pickwicks living in Bath today. 1 is an organist, 2 are grocers and provision merchants, and the occupation of the remaining 2 is just not given. I took up my hat, and I went out of the reference library in some excitement to meet the nearest Mr. Pickwick. Is Mr. Pickwick at home? Yes. Come in. A grave, middle-aged man looked at me through thoughtful grey eyes. I thought I'd never seen any man who looked so badly christened. I had expected a bald, bland, ripe old man with glasses who would put his head on one side and twinkle at me, but the real Mr. Pickwick might have been a professor of geology or a distinguished lawyer. I felt chilled. Are you, Mr. Pickwick? I asked. I am. What can I do for you? So we began. I discovered as we made friends that to bear the name Pickwick is not an unmixed blessing. It induces a horror of print. At hotels, people look at you when you give your name and think that you're pulling their leg. Now and again, hot Americans dash up to your door and say, "Hey, say there, put it there. I just want to say I've shaken hands with Mr. Pickwick, for I admire your ancestor more than you can ever tell. Yes, indeed, put it there. I'm going to the chop house. Yes, that's there, put it there, Mr. Pickwick. I like it very much." Thousands of people would be only too happy to be called Pickwick, I said. Would they? Mr. Pickwick replied grimly. Through no fault of my own, my name makes people smile. Pickwick was a silly old ass, you know. It is, of course, a remarkable name and a very notorious one, but it has the effect of causing notice wherever I go. No doubt I'm too modest. As he was saying this, it occurred to me how many ways the name Picnic might be of service to a man. In how many professions and trades is the ability to cause a smile before business begins the halfway house to success. Just think of a canvasser called Mr. Pickwick. A client would, in spite of him, see such a man. Who could help it? A Mr. Pickwick could float almost any kind of company, and people would I've no doubt, would follow him quite gaily anywhere. You are, of course, all one family? I asked. I suppose so. I believe that a direct descendant of Moses Pickwick changed his name some years back for family reasons. They still live in the neighbourhood. There are Pickwicks in America. Oh, sorry, he continues. There are Pickwicks in America, continued Mr. Pickwick. My two brothers went over there. Americans show great interest in the name. To me, however, the name Pickwick has never done any good. It's a little too spectacular for my liking. When my son was invalided home from France, the doctor saw his name and was so interested that he sat up with him all night across the channel. I suppose that is one of the occasions when the name really did something for us. But Mr. Pickwick saved the most interesting fact till I was going. It's a rather singular coincidence, he said, that my motor licence bears the name Pickwick and Wardle. The town clerk of Bath is named Wardle. I'm assuming that Pickwick and Wardle are two characters from whatever book it was. The Pickwick Papers, presumably. Anyway, I think it's a small regional supermarket chain. What Pickwick could well be. I crossed the Somerset border into Wiltshire and dipped into a little town that lies beside the ubiquitous Avon. It was, as Wiltshire towns go, quite a shock. At first it looked Dutch and, in other parts, Italian. Holland on the flat and Italy on the hill. The small white stone houses clung close to the hillside, narrow flagged lanes twisted this way and that, with lamp-posts planted about at the direction, it seemed, of distinguished artists. Wallflowers peeled over the walls, and trees leaned over the road, and one looked in vain for cypresses among the white houses. It was strange. An old man came towards me, and I stopped him. Bradford on Avon, he said. What do you do here besides looking like some name of a place in Italy? We make motor tyres, he replied. How many people know this place? Well, we get quite a few in and out for a quick look at the Saxon church. It's just round the corner. The lovely Julia and I went to Bradford on Avon, and we went and had a look at the Saxon church because there's very few of them in stone, don't you know? It's in my series on the canals that we did. And what a lovely day we had there too. It poured with rain. So anyway, it's just round the corner, the church. And what a church! If you're ever asked in a general knowledge paper to give the name of the oldest unaltered church in England, remember Bradford on Avon. Here is a church just as it was 1,000 years ago. A tiny yellow stone building with 3-foot thick walls and a nave, only 20 feet long. It was preserved by accident. The legend of it never quite died away, but the church itself became in the course of centuries smothered in buildings till an antiquarian vicar in 1857, looking down from a hill, noticed a stone roof in the form of a cross. He had the buildings pulled down and discovered in the heart of them this lovely, unique building. I met an architect in the church. What are the coincidences of that happening? One of the most remarkable buildings in England, he said, peering at the stones. I have a theory that when the Romans, who worked the Bath stone for centuries, left England, the tradition of Roman quarrying and squaring stone was handed down from father to son in this tiny, then isolated Saxon hamlet. The result is that the church is built on the Roman method. The square blocks, the thin line of mortar, at a time when the rest of Europe had forgotten the art of it. Most singular. In the old inn of Bradford, they give you tea in the room where Judge Jeffreys did his bloody work. The memory of Jeffreys will never die out of the west of England. Here they still utter his name in a hushed voice. Hanging in the halls are caps and jackets made of Bradford-on-Avon broadcloth, which was famous long before the Yorkshire Bradford dealt in wool. They were found in an old oak chest in the attic. One moment, please. When I came here 19 years ago, said the innkeeper, I thought how foreign the place looked, like Spain. Oh, or Holland, I said. Yes, or even Italy in parts, he replied. I took a local interest in things, and I discovered that Bradford was rebuilt in the 16th and 17th centuries by Flemish immigrants who came over to spin cloth. They still call a part of the town Dutch Barton. They brought with them an un-English idea of architect. The hills made it look like Italy. I don't believe the story that this Bradford is the parent of Yorkshire Bradford. That story grew because both towns were wool towns, see? The origin of the name Broadford is the ford over the river. By the way, you mustn't leave without seeing our bridge. It has an old mass chapel on it. A mass chapel on a bridge? I cried. Give me my bill. That's one of the things I've wanted to see all my life. I saw it. Now I would like to know who owns it. Who is responsible for the repair of the mass chapel of Bradford-on-Avon's bridge? Is it the town or the lord of the manor? Bradford-on-Avon seems to be in doubt about it, a fact that no one seems to care very much. This little chapel, which stands leaning over the water on a specially built pier out of the bridge, dates from the Middle Ages. There are only 4 other chapels of the kind in the whole of England, at Wakefield, Rotherham, Derby, and St Ives, Huntingdon. I believe the building on the bridge just outside the village of Wick, near Bath, is a 5th. It seems incredible that a town which has given such care to its Saxon church can allow its next most distinguished possession to be in danger of collapse. Its stones are in need of preservation. The iron stays placed to keep them together have split, and the whole structure needs careful attention. How slow someone must be in Bradford. If this chapel was restored, opened and furnished, Bradford could collect shillings and sixpences all day long from people anxious to peep inside the building, that is, with its 4 exceptions, unique in England. The recent history of Bradford's chapel is this: tool house, ammunition store for territorials, and lock-up. The weather vane on top of the chapel is in the form of a fish, which gave rise to the local saying that a man going to prison was going over the river under the fish. We've seen that. The lovely Julia and I went across the bridge when we were in Bradford-on-Avon, and there was this bridge with this tiny little, I thought it was a lock-up, but there it is, the chapel. Well, a mass chapel, is it? Not where you could put a mass of people in, you understand? Ouch. Not that at all. How are we doing? Wiki says Dickens took the name of Pickwick from a businessman, Eliza Pickwick. There we go. Died 1337. Well, it must be true then. I think it's a general small supermarket chain. Greetings, welcome from Paintwork, Andrew Alan Sandal. Oh, a break from, well, welcome from all that. Oh, paperwork, sorry, misread. What ho, just woken up, Andrew Norris. Just woken up? Good God. Did you have a good snooze? Yes, thanks. After I cooked a good lunch. Oh dear, how the other half live, eh? Very late this afternoon, got carried away finishing my book. What book is that you're writing, lovely Linda? Afternoon, says Ringer Ollie. Afternoon to you, Ringer Ollie. And Linda, what are you reading? Oh, The Wild Remedy by Emma Mitchell. Oh, when you said my book, I thought you were writing a book. The first noble sight I saw in Bristol was a ship mixed up with a tramway system. Ships come right into Bristol town. They nestle down with their cheeks against the tramway centre and go to sleep till the bananas are unloaded. Sometimes a full-rigged ship anchors with her bowsprits in the back of the nearest policeman and the shadow of her masts over the Clifton tramcars, and the men of Bristol think nothing of it. They have been accustomed to this disturbing sight for over 9 centuries. It must occur to a man looking at Bristol for the first time that a city which welcomes ships to her bosom in this manner could not help carving a great fortune on the seas. In the Middle Ages, when the masts of ships surrounded Bristol on 3 sides, thick as pine woods, and the spires of churches rose up between them, and between this... What? And the spires of churches rose up between them, and behind this city, this county must have been one of the most inspiring sights in all of England. One of those foolish travellers who cannot see the long procession of men and the affairs behind an English city, said, after boring me at some length on various subjects, "Of course, you won't go to Bristol. It's a smoky hole of a place, and there's nothing there to see." Nothing to see in Bristol? There is too much to see there. I could stay for a month and write to you of different stories every day. I could write about the bronze tables which sprout like toadstools from the pavement opposite the Exchange, the nails on which the Bristol merchants formerly paid their accounts, hence the saying, to pay on the nail. I could write about one of the finest modern universities in England, about the Dutch house, the half-timbered mansion that stands in the main street like a galleon in a modern port. I could describe the great length, the 16 almshouses of Bristol, which include St. Peter's Hospital, a marvel, and Foster's, with its chapel dedicated to the 3 kings of Cologne. It is a rather bitter vein that I could describe the decaying north porch of St. Mary's, Radcliffe, the church in which Chatterton claimed to have discovered the Rowley poems, a lovely carved 13th century porch which, I imagine, must be unique in England. It is a delicate tracery of Bath stone, black with soot, and round it the medieval craftsman has let himself all out on grotesque carvings, men with the bodies of fishes and beasts, queer half-human things creeping in niches, and peeping round corners, and each carving a gem. This porch is decaying in the city which spends millions of pounds on good works. My trouble in Bristol is that I cannot leave the byways. It is a city as fascinating as London, and in the same unconscious way. Bristol hides itself up alleys, just as London does. It gives nothing to him who does not search. But to the explorer, Bristol is generous with the unexpected, with sudden glimpses of old things, queer old buildings, old steps, alluring doorways, and, always, a sight of a ship lying landlocked between 2 streets. In Marsh Street, the centre of a maze of Georgian survivals, I came to the Merchant Venturers' Hall. No man who remembers the name of the 2 greatest venturers who trod English Quay, John Cabot, is it? And his son Sebastian, could stand for long outside this hall. Inside, what did I find? Here is one of the last medieval trade guilds. Let me read that again. Here, one of the last medieval trade guilds is busier than it ever was, more vigorous and more important. As I was taken through spacious room hung with stately 18th century portraits, through hall after hall into the banqueting chamber where crystal candelabra still hung from a high ceiling and a polished table gleams like a still pool, I could hardly have realised that I was not in one of my own ancient livery company halls in the shadow of Mansion House. "We can trace our history back to Henry II, said the treasurer. "Oh, yes, we're very busy. We run the Merchants' Venturers Technical College. The almshouse round the corner for the old seamen and seamen's widows was established by us in 1554. We look after the young and the old, you see." In the almshouses round the corner live 19 old sailors and 12 sailors' widows. They live in gracious old harbour of yellow cottages built around 3 sides of the paved courtyard. In the centre of the court rises a tall white mast, on which the old men run up flags at emotional moments. When they limp to their doors and gaze up the sky with eyes too dim now to cope with an approaching storm, these buildings take on the appearance of a becalmed vessel. They have sailed down nearly 4 centuries with an aged crew, a crew that changes every few years, yet always looks the same. Over the central building are these lines: "Free from all storms, the tempest and the rage of billows, here we spend an age. On weather-beaten vessels here repair, and from the merchant's kind and generous care find harbourage here. No more we put to sea until we launch into eternity." Over one of the doors are the words "Elder Brother." Inside lives Captain Andrews, skipper of this good old ship. "Quarrels are our only trouble," he said. "I settle all disputes if I can. Quarrels, you see, they're our only trouble. I settle all the disputes. Old men are often quarrelsome, especially when they tell the same old yarns to each other as they have for 14 years. An ancient mariner with a beard sprouting from beneath his chair in the real W.W. Jacobs manner, whoever he might be, and a short pipe apparently growing in his mouth, touched a peaked cap. "Morning, Captain. Fine day." "'Tis, so it is," said the skipper, and they both look up at the sky and out towards the prow or gate of the good ship, where the butcher's boy went whistling with mutton in his basket. What do these old sailors talk about? Well, here is a typical conversation. "The sea." Contemptuous spit. "The sea. When I signed on in 59, the sea was the sea. Now it's just a yachting. Young fellas don't know what the sea is. They might as well sign on into one of these here hotels. I crossed the Atlantic in a sailing boat in 69, sir, with a cargo of salt for the Newfoundland fisheries. The rats, mad with thirst, for they got the salt sea, gnawed through the lead pipes in the water tanks. And when 2 days out we began shipping water, and all hand... Well, after what? And then another thing. And then 2 days out we began shipping water, and it was all hands to the pumps. Those were the days. Up in the rigging with the sails, froze as hard as boards you did, and your nails torn off. Those were the days. You could cross the Atlantic in a hotel, and you would only see the ocean by mistake if you make the wrong turning and meet it sudden-like. Who, I said, is the very old man over there? Oh, that's the poet, sir. He can write, but he can't remember. He does recite his poems. Would he recite any to me? Oh, of course he would. He hasn't had an audience for months. We know 'em all. Oi! Cyril, come over here. The poet was nearly 90. His name is Hook. Hook, come over here and meet this here fine gentleman. He sat at his bare little table, assumed a dramatic expression, turned to me a grey bearded face, which may have been the face of a saint, and then he began his longest poem. What it lacked in metre and polish, it gained in sincerity. It started on the dock side as the author was watching a ship unload, and it ended with the downfall of the Kaiser. The old man's hand fell on the table, and his dramatic expression changed to a smile. The poem was over. "I will now," he said, "recite you the one about the almshouse fire." First, before you recite the one about the almshouse fire, which I'm sure is incredibly interesting and will take the rest of my life to digest, please, could you tell me how you came to compose verse? He told me that the war had inspired him, and since then he'd not been able to stop. He cannot write, but when he's saved up enough money, he will go to the Bristol typist and recite his poems. He remembers 25 long epics. I left old seaman Homer sitting at his bare table. Last night I didn't even buy him a drink, and went out into Bristol, this thriving, thrusting, modern city with a crowded past, a busy present, and a great future where so many kind deeds are hidden around a corner. It's a nice corner, as it goes. Yeah, well, I think we'll leave it there, because it's 1:45 and the next bit's a long one. Oh, wait a minute. Wait. Just hold your horses. We can get to chapter 9. Let's get to chapter 7, rather. There's one more bit. We can just do this one more bit. We'll just get through this one more bit. Right. Among those inventions and devices which may never fail to charm me, and I suppose all simple-minded persons... Oh, let me read that again, because that didn't come out right. Among those inventions and devices which never fail to charm me, and I suppose all simple-minded persons, are cuckoo clocks, warming pans, glass globes, which, when shaken, deluge a subgaseous landscape, I wish I'd never started now, in snow, and camera obscuras. I have found a really good camera obscura, a big one in which the figures are at least 6 inches high. It stands on the top of Clifton Down, not far from and slightly higher than the famous suspension bridge. Everyone in Bristol has, I gather, seen it and become weary of it, for I have twice paid down my sixpence and twice climbed the winding stairs to it, and each time the so-called observatory has been unlocked for me. Yet every Bristolian knows it. Oh, the observatory? Oh, yes. I haven't been there for years, but before we were married, my wife and I used to go up there and we'd have a look at the camera obscura. Oh, yes. That's how they talk about it. Gazing into the camera obscura at Clifton seemed a natural prelude to marriage in Bristol. On the Clifton Downs, the site of the early British camp, stands an innocent-looking tower, which is the eye of the hill. It is the remains of an ancient windmill, once known as Snuff Mill, which was partially destroyed by fire in the year of 1777. After lying derelict for half a century, a Mr. West made his home of this lonely tower in the year 1828, ideal home for a stargazer, an alchemist, or a camera obscurist. And he installed a telescope with a camera. The Snuff Mill then became known as the Observatory. Today, Mr. West's telescopes have earned their repose, but the camera obscura, one of the largest in the country, is still doing its fine work. I climbed to the top of the tower and was shown into the small circular apartment. The door was shut to exclude all light, save a thin beam filtered through a lens in the roof, which, falling downward so as to cover a large surface on a round convex table, reflected in sharp, coloured detail everything that was happening in the immediate locality. Slowly the table revolved, exposing as it did a new tract of country. How much more thrilling than a cinema is this ancient invention, at least to me. One is looking at life, not at actors. The colours in which the landscape is reproduced are perfect, and the people who stroll calmly across the mysterious Merlin's table in the dark room, so deliciously unconscious that the hill has its eye on them, move without the jerkiness of the cinema, without the self-consciousness of the film actor. They are, in fact, so natural that one childishly follows them with a finger and pinches the empty air in a futile attempt to pick them up. It seems that one should be able to capture one of them and hold them between finger and thumb as Gulliver examined a Lilliputian. An elderly woman walked slowly up to the downs, holding a parasol in a white-gloved hand. 2 Clifton schoolboys strung slowly over the green grass, talking. A man sat on a wooden bench reading a newspaper, all of them unconscious that every movement made by them was reproduced on the slowly revolving table in the tower. As it moved, I gained a glimpse of the thick woods on the opposite side of the gorge. I could see the wind moving the treetops and the thin puff of smoke ascending from a chimney. The view of Clifton Suspension Bridge, seen in this way, is more marvellous than the direct one. The thin, graceful thread flung from one side of the rocky gorge to the other is examined as a bird might see it in mid-air. One looks down on the towers and on the airy thread along which motor cars move, the footways over which people go, with, below them, 245 feet of space ending in a river with the jagged rocks. As I stood there in the dark, I thought that a few hundred years ago any man who owned a camera obscura would have been burned at the stake or made Lord Chancellor. The charm of looking into this reflection of life is the illusion it imparts of omnipotence. I said omnipotence because I knew that's not how you pronounce it. I just said it. All right? Just said it. Omnipotence. You are, as it were, enthroned anonymously in this position of unassailable safety and free from detection, watching the little actions of little men. Nothing escapes you. A man blowing his nose in a scarlet handkerchief occupies the universe for a second. There is also the charm of the unexpected. You never know what the next turn of the table will reveal, so that you stand in the dark like a second-class deity, observing the working of a more powerful intelligence. I've always wanted to be a second-class deity. Look, under the trees is a young father who's taken his family for a picnic and is keeping the baby quiet with chocolate while his wife sleeps in the shade. Another move of the table. A fat man puffs slowly up the hill, desperately hot, mopping his head, supremely ridiculous. If you met him face to face, he might be impressive, but here, with life just a shadow show, he is merely an amusing little clown in the circus of existence. Another move of the table. The scene shifts to a bosky dell. A young man is sitting on a seat with a girl. He looks carefully round to see that no one is looking. You know that he is extremely nervous, and he premeditates kissing her. For the first time you feel the camera obscura is, well, a rather low-down invention. Why should you? Not quite playing the... What? Oh, now he's done it. He's made a frightful hash of it. Aiming an inexpert salute, which landed on her ear. He's received a slap in the face. Oh my, and the table moves on. You leave the dark room of this simple wizardry and look through the windows of the tower. How strange. There sits the man and the girl under the distant tree. There, in the shady hollow, the father feeding his young chocolate. There stands the fat, puffing man beside a fence, and in the remote distance walks the elderly woman whose parasol is like a little yellow mushroom on the grass. Why, you wonder, has no writer of detective stories used the camera obscura? The eye on the hill lends itself to this treatment. You go down, and in your turn you become a little painted shadow moving on the table beneath someone else's eye. You feel divine no longer. You wrestle with a gamin desire to turn round in the direction of the tower and put out your tongue just to show some peeping Tom that you know all about him. And that, my friends, takes us up to chapter 7. That was all of chapter 6. And that was rather jolly, wasn't it? Rather jolly. Travels by and think, I am meeting a subscriber to my channel there for a beer, says Trev's, what's the name? And he's got show hide. What happens if I click show hide? Let's see. Oh, it's gone. Gone before I could even click it. So that sounds very good. I don't know what that means. A radio interview. Oh, I should show you your local sites. Infinite Koala Army says, hi, Richard. Well, we're coming to the end. It's 5 to 5. 5 to 5. It's not quite Friday, though, so no crackerjacks. Up north, people generally listen and react to you. Down south, people ignore you. Yes, it's usually the way with me. My dad was a North Londoner. Peeping Tom. So are all Toms peeps, or are all peeps Toms? Who knows? That is the riddle. Can't think of anything worse than a cruise ship carrying thousands of people. What about Auschwitz? That's a lot worse. I can think of worse things. Much, much worse. Terrible things. Graham Cass says, I'm sure when I watch an Ealing comedy, I get the impression London and the South East were lovely 50-odd years ago. There's been a huge cultural change in it. Yes, there definitely has. Yes. This is why I wanted to have the quest for England, to see what England is like today. And of course, I'm concentrating on as much as I can, the nicer parts of England. Why go in quest of the horrible parts? Why go to Luton? Yeah, exactly. I clicked show for that comment. Oh, I see. Well done. Cracking show. Can you do Fred Scuttle, please, says Norton Lewis. Is there a stream on the Vogue show? No Vogue show tonight. Fred Scuttle. I don't know Fred Scuttle. I can't think how he talks, actually. I don't know. I've heard the name vaguely, but I couldn't tell you who he was. Tomorrow is the next Vogue show. Yes, thank you, Julia. That's right, 8 p.m. That's a Friday night. Very nice reading. Thank you very much. No Julia in tomorrow's show because she's had to switch days now. She is on the Wednesday, so it'll just be me. I know it won't be as good, but I'm afraid that's it. Anyway, better go. Thank you so much. Nice bit of bubbling spring water there to get me to belch. Benny Hill character. Oh, yes, that does ring a bell. I'll have to look that up. Morton had an amazing memory or a big notebook. Yes, he must have made notes as he went round. He claims, doesn't he, that he is writing at certain places. Like the other day, he says, I was writing on Glastonbury tour. But I don't suppose for a moment that was the case. I'm sure he made notes and things and maybe, wrote. What did you stream with? Oh, what do you stream with? I stream with OBS. I use OBS. I don't know what OBS stands for, but if you search OBS on Google, you'll find it. And I'm in the YouTube studio, and they connect. I can't remember how they connect now. Now set it up. Can't remember how you. It just. Oh, YouTube asks you. That's right. YouTube asks you where your camera is, and you tell it it's on OBS, and then it goes, oh, okay. I assume he was writing in a notebook on location before. Yes, that's how I would do it. I do often think it would be far better to go around and write one's experiences. I mean, if only one was better at the describing things, it would be fun to do that. But nobody buys books. You don't get patrons of books, unfortunately. It means open broadcast service. There we go. Thank you. Open and Panox has arrived just as we're saying goodbye. So anyway, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed that. I've got some editing to do shortly. I've got one more piece to record. I've been doing a sort of behind the scenes of my day today for tomorrow's video. Just something a bit different. Tomorrow I hope to go out. It's going to be a sunny day, so I hope to get a walk video done tomorrow. That's the plan. Not quite sure where, but I've got a vague idea. So there we go. Anyway, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's been lovely to be a performing monkey for you. All good fun. Take care and look after yourselves. I will now go and look at my new veg that I've got. Woohoo! Take care. Bye for now. Bye.